Hi there, this is Ryan Chatterson, and today I'm going to teach you how to build a center bottom drain for your fish culture tank. Now, what I've got here in my hands is what we're going to learn how to build. And there are only a few components here to actually make this. And it can cost you a lot of money if you're going to buy this from a store, but if you have a few simple tools, you can make this fairly quickly. And just to show you what this is, we have actually just a piece of PVC pipe. Now, don't mind the color. This is actually biofilm that has dried on this after I pulled it out of a culture tank, and I just didn't scrub it up and make it look pretty for you. So we've got a 3-inch PVC pipe. That's how big the bottom drain is for the culture tank that I designed this for. And on the bottom, we actually have a stub of PVC sticking out from the bottom plastic disc here. And we have a slot that's drilled in that disc, and you can kind of see that here on camera, the slot. The space below the slot is what fits into the bulkhead fitting in your tank. So this is sunk in below the tank level. This little slot is for all of your fish waste to exit the fish culture tank out of. And then we have the plastic disc, which acts as a barrier and a guard so that once the waste actually gets close to the hole, a fish coming up and swimming doesn't actually knock it away and resuspend it in the water column. And it actually also helps to increase the water velocity as those wastes get closer to that center hole, kind of acting like a vacuum and sucking those solids into the center bottom drain once the tank velocities have moved them there in the first place. So again, this is fairly easy to make. We have PVC pipe, we have a plastic disc that we're going to have to construct, and we have a uniseal that we use to put the piece of pipe through the plastic disc. So first off, let's talk about the PVC pipe. Okay, now you don't have to have a long piece of PVC. We can cut the PVC off right above that plastic disc and put a cap on it. And that's perfectly fine. That's a center bottom drain, capped off. It's doing what you need it to do. In this case, I'm actually using this for two things. We extended the pipe up above the water line. The water line is actually right here where you'll notice these 4 holes are. That's the water level in the fish culture tank that I built this for. And then you see it extends up above that. Well, there's 2 reasons. One is that, the water level is actually right below these holes here, right below. So if there's any kind of clogging that happens in the center bottom drain, the water's gonna rise and it's actually gonna drop out and overflow through these emergency overflow holes instead of over the sidewall of your fish tank. So instead of flowing out all over the ground, this actually allows the water, if there's a small clog in this slot here, a dead fish, something weird that makes it under that bottom drain, well, you'll know it because the water level is going to rise and the water is going to go out of these exit holes. You'll still have the hydraulics of the tank working fine, but you'll notice right away that your tank water level is a little bit higher and that the water is flowing through the emergency holes. Over these holes, we actually, if you have small fry, something like that, we can put a screen over it just in case the water level rises, it doesn't suck them down. But these were drilled large enough, or small enough I should say, so that fish that were in this culture tank weren't going to be able to fall through those holes in case of an emergency overflow situation. So again, you can see the differences. Now, why do we have it extended up even above that? Well, I put nets over our culture tanks because a lot of our fish jump and they'll jump right out of the water onto the ground and die. Now, on a larger tank, the net is going to want to sag in the middle. So by extending this above the water level, it actually acts as a center support for that net so that it keeps the net off of the surface of the water and allows me to tighten it around the rim of the tank. So it's basically, think of any kind of tent, even the one I'm under, it has a center point. Well, this allows for a little bit higher center point above the surface of the water to hold that net on. But by all means, it's just a piece of PVC pipe. If you don't have nets on your tank or don't have that need, you could cut it off right at the water level. You don't even need these holes. Just cut the pipe right off flat and put a screen over it. And then if the water level ever rises, it'll overflow and fall right down that pipe. If you don't want to put an emergency overflow on it, you can just cut it right above the plastic disc and put a cap on that. So that's not too hard. Now this is a bulkhead. So we just talked about we're going to stick that pipe into the bulkhead in the bottom of the tank? Well, a bulkhead actually consists of 3 parts. It's a bolt, a nut, and a rubber washer. It's very easy to think about it that way. They use a little bit different terminology when you look at buying bulkheads, but that's all this is: a bolt, a nut, and a rubber washer in between. So we always want to stick that rubber washer on the inside of the tank, so that naturally the pressure is pushing against, the water pressure is pushing against that rubber seal. If it's on the outside of the tank, it's pushing against it, trying to pry it out. By having it on the inside, it actually helps that seal because it's pushing down on it. So always have the seal on the inside of the tank, and we go ahead and install this, and it would actually look like this in the bottom of the tank. So this would actually go below the tank, and then this portion right here is inside of the fish culture tank. And we just slide that tube right down in there. Now we want to go ahead and take a ruler and measure what the depth of that socket is, so that it's 1 3/4 inches, okay? So we measure that socket, and that's going to tell us how much here we need to leave out. We need to go ahead and leave 1 3/4 inches of a stub that's going to fit down in that bulkhead, leaving our gap for the wastes to exit the tank right above the level of the bulkhead. So we want it as close to the bottom of the tank as possible. And this is nearly flush with the top of that bulkhead. So the first step to doing this is going to be to construct a disc, a plastic disc, okay? So you can use acrylic, you can use ABS plastic, usually use a 1/4 inch thick plastic. You want to make sure that it's thick enough, it's not going to flex. You can have a little flex, you can see this, gives it a little flex if I put some pressure, but under normal circumstances, this is a very rigid piece of plastic. You could usually purchase these as a hardware store in maybe a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet, sometimes a 4-foot by 2-foot sheet, or you can look online for other suppliers of this plastic, because again, you don't need much. But ABS plastic, you can use acrylic, you can use Lexan, anything that's actually just strong enough that it's going to keep its rigidity when you install it in that fish tank. Now, to start off, excuse this being a little old and dirty, but this is actually a piece of acrylic. That's what I'm going to use today to demonstrate how to make one of these discs. So it usually comes with some paper on each side. You go ahead and do the job, and then you peel the paper off, and it's a beautiful finish, so you don't have any scratches on the acrylic. Depending on what you're using it for, you might not want scratches. So this is kind of older looking, but you can see this side is after I've removed the wrapping on that. But we went ahead and I cut this down to size on a table saw. So I just use a table saw because it's a lot easier to work with a smaller piece of material when you're trying to cut, you know, your shape. So let's say we want to cut a 12-inch disc. Well, if you're using a 48-inch piece of plastic, it's a lot to work with. If you cut it down just a little bit bigger than a 12-inch disc, so like 13 by 13, then it's a lot easier to work with that small piece of plastic, and you don't have too much waste left over. So we're going to start with this, and we're going to go ahead and cut in just a minute and refocus on the routing table. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to cut a circle out of this. Then we'll go ahead and cut a circle out of the middle of the circle for the installation of the uniseal, and then we can just go ahead and slide that pipe right on through. So we'll show you all the steps here, but there's just a few pieces, and when you get it right, this can save you a lot of money. So we're over at the router now, and I just want to show everybody, this is what we're using for this project. It's a Ryobi 1.5 horsepower router. It's about $70 brand new at your Home Depot. So not that expensive of a tool. And again, this is one of the many tools you can buy with all the money you saved having to fly out to a workshop. So $70, this investment will save you that just making 1 or 2 bottom drains, and then you'll have it forever. So it's really nice. I've got it mounted under this. We made a little makeshift routing table here so that we have the router underneath, and right here we actually have the router blade sticking up. And if you're not familiar with a router, you may be familiar with the Dremel tool, and it's very similar. It's just a larger, bulkier piece of equipment. So we've got the bit here. Go ahead and get the box out of the way. I've gone ahead and pre-measured on our piece of acrylic board here for an 18-inch disc. That's what we're going to go ahead and make. So what we do is we want to go 9 inches and then drill a hole from where we're actually going to start the disc. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to come to our starting mark, which I've marked on the board, and then we're going to go ahead and unplug the router and drill a hole right through the center mark of where this disc is going to be to hold the piece of material in place. And you'll see what I mean as we get going here. Never force the material, just lightly slide it through until we reach our set mark. Okay, so we've now drilled into where I marked my set point. Excuse the goat in the background. So what I've done here is I've made a mark for our starting mark, and then we've made another mark that's the center point of the disc. So if we want an 18-point disc, we want to make a point 9 inches from the side, so that's the center. 9 inches is our radius. So we got our side point, we've gone in 9 inches. I'm gonna go ahead and drill a hole right through this. Right into the router table below it. Now I switched bits real quick to a Phillips head. I'm gonna go ahead and put a screw right through the table here. Okay, we've got a nice screw there. Everything's stationary. Now we're going to go ahead and turn the router back on and just spin this in a circle around the screw. And just like that, we've saved ourselves a whole lot of money. Okay, it's a little messy. Always remember to use your safety goggles, okay? Because you will get stuff in your eyes if you don't. Now we'll go ahead and just dislodge this screw. Go ahead and back it out. And we've got our disc. That's exactly what we need. We've just made our whole bottom plate. Router paid off for itself. Now, if you're gonna use some of these in the future, I suggest when you're all set up, go ahead and make a few. Just use up your material, make a few, and stow them away because you'll probably use them later. Something else to mention, it's hot out here. I think it's like 95 degrees out when we're shooting this today. Don't leave these out in the sun or they will warp because it's plastic. So if it heats up extremely hot in the bright sun, it's going to warp. Now, it won't do that in the water. It will never do that in the water because the water is going to keep it cool enough and, deflect enough light that it's not going to warp it. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to go through all this work, leave it laying there, come back from lunch, and the whole thing's warped and unusable, okay? So the next step, we're going to go ahead and get a hole saw, and we're going to drill the correct size hole right out of the center. And that way we can install a uniseal into this disc. Okay, now we have our disc routed. After mounting it to the router, milling the plate, we already have this constructed. Now it's time to actually drill a hole with a hole saw, and we're going to install a uniseal through the plate to hold our pipe. Now, whether it's a uniseal or a bulkhead, the first thing you have to do is get the right size hole saw, okay? This is a hole saw. It's cuts circular holes in wood, metal, plastic, whatever you're looking to cut it in. There's a central drill bit that actually acts as the guiding point. So that drill bit hits your material and guides the rest of this round bit into the material to cut a nice circle for you. Specifically with uniseals, you need to make sure this is not only the right size, but a new bit. You don't want an old bit when you start a project, especially when you're doing outside of tank walls, things like that, where it's going to possibly leak and matter. You use a good new bit. A nice clean cut is what's going to cause a good uniseal installation and allow you to have a leak-free installation. So we're going to go ahead and use this bit. This is a 2.5 inch bit to install a 1.5 inch uniseal into this plate here. Okay. Now, never forget your safety glasses. Put your safety glasses on, and we'll go ahead and drill this plate. It's going to get loud here for just a second. One of the keys is to never force the drill bit. Just let the weight of the drill and the drilling action force its way through the plate, or you'll get a big jagged cut. You want nice, smooth, slow cuts to remove this piece. And there you see we just broke through. There's the piece that we just removed from the acrylic disc. And here's our finished disc. Nice, clean cut edge. Okay, exactly what we want for the uniseal. So now we're going to go ahead and grab the 1.5 inch uniseal, which you see here. We're going to insert it into the hole in the middle. Okay, nice, snug fit. It goes right through. You always insert the pipe from the larger end of the uniseal, the end with the large flange, not the skinny end, because this is a tapered hole. And how these work is as you force the pipe through that tapered hole, the thickness of the pipe pushing against this rubber and then against the sidewall of the plastic creates a seal. So that's basically how it works. Now, as just being plain rubber, it's really hard to force a pipe through here. So we're going to use some Windex, spray that sucker down, and then we're going to insert our pipe. Now, I haven't cut this piece of 1.5 inch pipe yet, but we're just going to show you how we insert it through. A little dirtier than I expected. Get some of that dirt off of there. And with Windex, it goes in real easy, guys. You spray a little of the pipe down so you can actually get it to slide easier. Okay, and you can see we forced the pipe through the disc. All right, now this works again on a bottom drain of a larger size, 3 inch. You see right here, we've done the same thing. I'm actually using 1.5 inch on this disc because we're going to use this in a later project when we build a radial flow settler, a center outlet radial flow settler. So killing 2 birds with 1 stone there. But as you see, that's how you force it through. So we want to go ahead and I'll show you how to drill the slots on this pipe right now. But first we drill the slots on the pipe, and then we force the pipe through the uniseal so that the slots are just on the other side of the uniseal. And because we've pre-measured this, we know this stub is going to go down into the bulkhead. I can force that all the way down, but you can see it'll go all the way up to the bottom of this, and then we'll just have that gap, and that's going to be our solids capturing area. So I'll come back to you in just a minute here, and we'll show you how to construct the slots on this pipe. Okay guys, now we're going to drill the slotted hole in the pipe that we're going to use for the bottom drain, okay? And it's not very hard. All you need is a flexible ruler, some type of flexible ruler, so that you can get a correct measurement going around this entire piece of pipe. So I'm using a piece of 3 inch pipe for this example. So a piece of flexible ruler, you need a Sharpie marker to be able to mark it off. We need a drill bit. Okay, so this is a 3/8 inch drill bit I'm gonna go ahead and use and drill through the PVC pipe. And then we're going to use a jigsaw, okay? A jigsaw is going to allow us to connect the dots, per se. So we're going to drill a hole with the drill at each side of that gap, okay? And then we're going to use the jigsaw to remove the middle. Now what we have to do, what is very important, is we have to leave 3 legs of support so that the entire pipe doesn't collapse and break. And for that, we're going to use 1-inch supports. So let's go ahead and take a full measurement going around this pipe. Okay, so we're almost at a foot. Going all the way around this pipe, we're just about 11¼ inches. Okay, so you can do some math here and know that if we've got 11¼ inches and we want to leave 3 legs that are 1 inches each, we do an 11¼ minus 3. So we have 8¼ inches to work with for those gaps. Okay, just 8¼, write that down here. 3 1-inch legs, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and start marking this off. Now, again, the most important thing is to start off at the right spot. So let me grab this bulkhead here. And again, we'll go ahead and take a measurement to see how deep that bulkhead is. A little more difficult to do this with a flexible ruler, but we'll make it work. Okay, so we're at 1 3/4 of an inch. That's how deep the socket is. So we go ahead and mark 1 3/4 inch up from the bottom of our pipe. Again, if it takes you a minute to mark it, don't worry, just get the right mark. Okay, so we know that 1 3/4 inch right here, that's gonna be the bottom of where our slot's gonna start. So you can actually take your drill bit, stick it right on that mark, and mark the other side. Okay, and you can see where we've marked these 2 holes here with the Sharpie marker. And that's basically the top and the bottom of where we're going to be drilling. So that's the width of our slot. Now we can go ahead and measure around the rest of this. Again, we said doing 3 1-inch legs, that leaves us with 8 1/4 of an inch to work with. So we want to go ahead and divide 8 1/4 inches by 3, which gives us 2.75 inches. Okay, so 2 3/4. That's how long each of our slots is going to be. So we go ahead and measure 2 3/4. So we go ahead and we set that's our first slot. Now we know we can go 1 inch from here and leave a leg. So we'll go ahead and draw that out. We've got our slot, we've got our 1-inch leg. Now we do another slot, 2 3/4 inches. And then we do another inch. Okay, and then we do another 2 3/4 inches. And what's left is another inch. Okay, there's our bad hole, but it leaves us with our last leg there. So we've now got our 3 legs, our 3 gaps. Now it's just time to drill. Sometimes, first off, we want to go ahead and measure the distance from the bottom of our pipe to each of these dots that I just drew, because I kind of drew those quickly and freehand so that you can get an idea how we're going to do this. So we go ahead and recheck those, and then we'll start at each end point of those gaps and we'll drill our holes, and then we'll go ahead and saw out the middle with the jigsaw. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and drill now. So get your drill bit out, install it. And remember, you're not drilling in the center of those two marks that you marked. You're drilling, that's gonna be the outside of the drill bit. So go ahead and line up on it, get the outside of your drill bit lined up on it, and make your hole. There we go. Sometimes a big drill bit and a small drill takes a little more to get through, but you can see we made our hole here, right? We're gonna go ahead and make another hole at the other side. Line up your bit, get it centered. Remember, try to go slow. All right, we can obviously see we broke through there. We've got two beautiful holes here, okay? Now, we're gonna go ahead and connect these. You've gotta make sure to have a small enough jigsaw blade that you're not gonna nail the back end of the pipe when you're actually drilling through, okay? So you see how it extends? Sometimes you use too long of a jigsaw blade and it's gonna hammer the back end of that PVC pipe as you're cutting. And it's really hard to cut something that way. So get the appropriate size blade. I bought a pack of a bunch of, basically an assortment of blades, $8. So it wasn't that big of an investment. This old Black & Decker jigsaw was maybe $29. So again, just it's a little oxidized from a lot of use in the sun out here, but invest in a couple of tools and you'll be able to make this stuff for the life of your system. Whenever you expand, anything you can do. And honestly, you can probably make a little money, you know, selling some of these components to your friends to help them out. At least to recoup your costs. So we're gonna go ahead and cut this line. Now, let's be smarter to go ahead and mark it so we have a straight line to follow. It's getting hot out here, sorry, I'm not thinking clearly. All right, so got a nice line there. Can get our Sharpie out. All right, and then we'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other side so we have a guide to follow. And this has to be as perfect as you want to make it. You can take all day doing these things or you can just eyeball it. If you get close, the engineering's still going to be close. All right, and as always, remember your safety glasses. Work it nice and slow like everything else. Okay, we cut through our first edge there. Let's take the second one out. Okay, nice clean cut slot there. Nice rounded corners. We can go through this with a deburring tool. I'll break that out later and show you how to use that when we go through some more plumbing stuff. But that's a nice clean slot. We can go ahead and construct our leg. We can drill our next hole here, remove the slot, leg, remove the slot. So that's the technology behind it. And again, all of this bottom stub is going to be in a bulkhead. Above this is where we're actually going to have our plastic plate. And then if we just wanted to make a bottom drain without an emergency overflow, we would cut it off right above that plate and we would stick this cap right on top. And there's a bottom drain. So again, just to relate it back, here is what we're building. We just made that slot. You can see the legs in this bottom drain here. And you can see the stub that was actually in the bulkhead. We'll take you over to the fish culture tank and show you how we're going to actually install this into the bulkhead in the bottom. We'll just stick it in there and show you in person so you get an idea of what it looks like in the tank. And that's it for this session. Again, if you have any questions at all, please email me, ryan@collegeofaquaponics.com, and I will be sure to cover those questions in our weekly question and answer session and make sure you get all the information that you need. Thank you very much.